In Hollow Creek, there was an old custom. If you turned 30 and still were not married, the community chair would arrange for you to come home and meet potential matches. When I told Marcus about it, he laughed coldly. What kind of backwoods tradition is that supposed to be? Constance, I said I would marry you and I will. But pressuring me is something else. Then he took out the ring and casually handed it to Hannah. She accepted it with a blush. I was going to propose, he said. But since you want to act like this, maybe we should cool off for a while. The ring I had waited years for was handed to someone else like it meant nothing. For a moment, I just stood there, stunned. Marcus walked out of my office with an easy confidence, the corner of his mouth lifted in a victorious smile. Hannah held the ring out to me. I did not take it. Keep it, I said. Wasn't it meant for you anyway? You wear it. It suits you. Her face went pale. I showed her to the door. Before closing it, I said, tell Mr. Vale that he and I are done. By the time Marcus Vale came home from work that night, I had already packed 2 large suitcases. He stopped short when he saw them. Why did you come home without waiting for me? There it was again. He had a way of turning the page all by himself, as if nothing had happened, and then expecting me to step down from whatever anger I had and keep playing the role of the loving girlfriend. But I did not want to play along anymore. Didn't your little assistant pass along my message? His brow tightened at once, as if I had touched a nerve. I'm trying to talk to you properly. Do you have to be sarcastic? Hannah is from your hometown. You're the one who asked me to bring her into the company. Why are you acting like this now? He was not wrong. Hannah Price was from the same mountain community as me. The community chair back home had always told those of us who left for the city to look out for one another. So when she graduated and could not find work, I brought her into our company. At first she was sweet and obedient, and I was happy to mentor her. Then I began noticing the way she looked at Marcus. I knew that look well. Back in school, Marcus had been the kind of man girls stared at from across hallways. I had seen countless women look at him that way. But Marcus had never looked back. So I treated Hannah's crush as a young woman's passing fantasy, and did not make a fuss. Then her mistakes at work became more frequent. Once, after I corrected her in passing, she did not argue. She simply stood there crying while I spoke. Marcus could not take it. For the first time, he yelled at me in front of the whole company. She's just a young girl. Say a few words and let it go. Why are you acting like some big executive in front of a girl from your hometown? I laughed in anger and refused to back down. Do you know how many messes the rest of the company has cleaned up because of her? He waved his hand like it did not matter. Fine. Then Hannah can be my private assistant. He looked around at everyone watching. From now on, if anyone has a problem with her, come directly to me. Don't gossip behind her back. If you can work, work. If you can't, get out. He walked ahead as if he had won a battle. Hannah followed behind him, and even her back seemed to glow with worship. Now Marcus stood over me again. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped judging things by right and wrong. With me, everything had become a contest. He was no longer the man who once said to me in a tiny rented apartment, "You're the only person I'll ever be willing to lose to." I glanced at my phone. My flight confirmation was still open on the screen. I was going home soon. I no longer had the energy to argue. You're right. I was being dramatic. It won't happen again. For a moment, his expression turned blank. I suppose he had prepared himself for me to demand when he planned to marry me, to ask why he and Hannah were so unclear with each other. He had not expected me to admit defeat so calmly. After a few seconds, he threw out, "Suit yourself," and left. He did not come home that night. The next morning, I went to work as usual. I could let Marcus go, but Joya Era was the company I had poured all my effort into. Even if I left, I still had to arrange what came next. Besides, I would still receive stable dividends every year. I was considering who I could promote to the front line so I could guide things remotely when Riley Brooks, the sales manager, appeared at the elevator with a terrible expression. She was one of the company's earliest employees, and had followed me through countless pitches and projects. I had never seen her look so defeated. "Ms. Rivers, last night we sent Mr. Vale the quote for review. Ms. Price said he was asleep, and that she would handle it. But she accidentally sent the client our bottom line cost sheet along with the quote. Now the client is demanding a 20% discount, and our gross margin is only 30%. This is a project we've followed for more than 6 months. If we keep going, we lose money. If we walk away, we may lose the client completely." I nodded as I pushed open Marcus's office door. Hannah was lying sideways on the office sofa bed, while Marcus sat beside her, feeding her water by the spoonful. That sofa bed had been bought years ago, when we first started the company, because Marcus wanted to force me to rest. He had said, "My office is your private lounge." Even after the company grew, moved, and built out its own headquarters, I brought that sofa bed along. Now another woman lay on it, and he guarded her with the tenderness that used to belong to me. My chest tightened for a second. Strangely, it no longer hurt. When Hannah saw me, she immediately sat up. Constance, don't misunderstand. I fainted because I felt so guilty, so Marcus was only giving me sugar water. I still remembered the first time she met Marcus. Back then, she treated him as my future husband. At some point, that had changed. I ignored her and slapped the report onto Marcus's desk. At the client's current price, we lose $1.2 million if we take this project. I glanced at them both. So which one of you is covering the loss? Hannah's eyes reddened instantly. It's all my fault. I should have woken Marcus. I just felt sorry for him because he was so tired. I'll go talk to Mr. Carter. I'll beg him. Marcus frowned down at the documents and did not stop her. Riley and I stood there without moving. Hannah was stuck in her own performance with no one willing to cue the next scene. I folded my arms and looked at her. Hannah, business does not work because you cry or beg. She lifted the cashmere blanket and took 2 steps before collapsing to the floor. The performance was so clumsy that I felt dumber for witnessing it. But Marcus, the celebrated business genius, believed it. He helped Hannah up and carefully settled her back on the sofa. Constance, you're always so aggressive. Does the whole world have to revolve around you? I tapped the desk. Don't waste my time with things unrelated to the project. $1.2 million. What are you going to do? His eyes reddened. If taking it means losing money, then we don't take it. I laughed coldly. Do you remember how much we drank and how many nights we stayed up to win this client? And this is not our only project with them. If we give them up, how many more 1.2 million losses will follow? Marcus Vale, did a dog eat your brain? He shot me an impatient look and muttered, so petty. Then he pulled out a bank card and threw it at my face. It's only 1.2 million. I'll pay for her. Happy. My cheek burned. But I was eerily calm. The poor boy who once thought $12 burger was expensive could now toss out 1.2 million without blinking. He had forgotten how many people's livelihoods depended on the decisions in his hand. Or maybe he knew and simply did not care. If 1.2 million did not matter, what about 100 times that? I wanted to see whether he would still be so careless then. I asked my best friend, Olivia Hart, to meet me for afternoon tea. She was still cursing Marcus when I received a message from Riley. Ms. Rivers, please come back to the office. Now. When I reached my office, Hannah was directing people to move out my desk. Contracts, files, and project materials were scattered across the floor. All of it was built piece by piece with my own hands. Who gave her the right? Put everything down. I crossed the room in 3 strides and slapped Hannah across the face. Who allowed you to touch my things? Hannah held her cheek, but her eyes were stubborn. Marcus said you lost a major deal, so you no longer deserve this office. He said you should work in a cubicle in the common area. Maybe someone had already told him, because Marcus arrived moments later. His eyes flickered when he saw the mess. Hannah, I told you to notify her. Who told you to move her things? Hannah lowered her hand, revealing the red mark on her face, and looked at him pitifully. His heart softened at once. Constance, I made the decision. If you want to vent, vent at me. But rules are rules. Hannah sent the cost sheet, yes, but your team submitted the file. You bear direct responsibility. He sighed and placed both hands on my shoulders. I saw that you bought a plane ticket. But I don't have time to go home with you. Take this chance to go back for a few days, all right? I shook off his hands. Who said I wanted you to go with me? I'm going home because... He sneered. Because you're going home to be matched with someone and get married? Stop threatening me with that. Hannah already told me your village doesn't have any rule that women must go home and marry at 30. Hannah said. Constance, don't blame me for telling Marcus. I just couldn't bear to see him deceived. I looked her over calmly. Designer suit. Chanel earrings. Louis Vuitton bag. None of it matched her salary. And it was worlds away from the girl I first knew. Back then, she had been grateful because I paid part of her tuition. Her first decent college outfit was bought by me. I took her to open her first bank account. I took her to her first buffet. She once said she would repay me when she succeeded. Now she leaned against my boyfriend, wearing things my boyfriend bought, while saying she pitied him for being deceived by me. I no longer cared to preserve anyone's dignity. From my bag, I pulled out a stack of printed pages. In front of the entire office, I began reading aloud. 3 months ago, my boyfriend took you to a hotel. Room fees and protection totaled $5,800. 2 months ago, he bought you a limited edition bag worth $10,200. 1 week ago, he bought you a ring worth $126,000. I flipped the pages. Every item has photos and receipts. So tell me, who exactly is deceiving whom? Whispers spread through the office. Some people looked at Hannah with open contempt. Marcus's face shifted between white and red. I told the staff to put everything back. Even when Marcus tried to stop them, no one listened. Riley even said with a pointed smile, Ms. Rivers, I'll disinfect the room for you. It reeks of mistress in here. The disinfectant spray landed on Marcus and Hannah. In the end, Marcus could only snap, fine, all of you, before leaving with Hannah. Once the office was restored and I had barely sat down, the community chair back home called me. Willow, are you sure you're coming back? If you are, I'll ask Owen Cole to pick you up at the station. A smile I had not felt in a long time came over me. I already bought my flight. But don't tell Grandma yet. I want to surprise her. The community chair's voice brightened as he agreed again, and again before hanging up. There was no real rule in our village that unmarried 30-year-olds had to go home and marry. But my grandmother was 80. She could not wait forever. After Marcus and I finally tore away the mask, he and Hannah became even more shameless at work. It was as if they no longer had to hide from me. Or maybe they wanted to provoke me. They went everywhere together. Whenever Marcus attended an event, Hannah appeared beside him as his female companion. She even started acting like the lady of the company, ordering people around and waiting for me to leave so she could take my place. Riley complained about them several times. I patted her shoulder. Hold steady. Let her get arrogant. After Hannah's fifth attempt to provoke me failed to get a reaction, she finally could not keep pretending. She stormed into my office without knocking. Marcus doesn't want you anymore. Why are you still clinging to this place? I casually straightened the newest designer blazer on her shoulder. Men are simple. Their money goes where their love goes. Don't tell me you forgot. I own 49% of this company. What do you have? Want to bet? If he is willing to give you 10% of the company, I'll give up my shares and leave. If he refuses, you leave. Dare. Her face went pale. But in the end, she nodded. Fine. Bet. Don't regret it. A few days later, Hannah brought Marcus into my office. She slammed a share transfer agreement on my desk. When I saw the clause transferring 15% to her, I laughed. Constance, stop pretending you're calm. Pack up and get out. Marcus looked at me unnaturally. Constance, don't blame me for helping her. It's just a bet. Think of it as a consolation prize for a young girl. Then his tone shifted. But business people value credibility. Even a private bet must be honored. Don't worry. Even if you give up your equity, I'll still marry you. You can be Mrs. Vale. Your monthly allowance will only go up, not down. As for Hannah, I won't let her appear in front of you again or challenge your position. After all these years, he had not learned much, but he had somehow learned to dream of having both. Marcus, what a beautiful calculation. You expect me to give up dividends and go home to become a woman who asks you for spending money. I don't want it. Hannah produced a recording of me clearly saying I would honor the bet and give up my equity. Then she handed me a voluntary equity waiver. Riley's eyes reddened, and she rushed forward to snatch it. I stopped her. Then I picked up the pen and signed. Hannah's face flushed with excitement. A complicated emotion flashed through Marcus's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by triumph. I set down the pen. Enough? Marcus nodded and announced to everyone. From now on, Hannah is my partner. She will replace Constance's position. Some employees looked frightened. Others immediately began flattering Hannah. We'll follow Ms. Price's instructions from now on. What are you waiting for? Move Ms. Rivers' things out and make room for Ms. Price. The thermos Marcus once bought me was knocked to the ground and dented. The blanket I knitted myself fell and was stepped on. Even the orchid I had raised for years had a branch snapped off. I did not stop them. I did not get angry. I only remembered the day we moved into this office and Marcus spun me around in his arms. Constance, we did it. This is our business empire. My vision blurred for a second, then cleared. I quietly watched the place I had fought for over the years be emptied piece by piece. Only when the sign on my office door changed to Ms. Price's office did I turn around. I walked straight into Marcus's office and sat in his chair. Marcus, I said, you are now dismissed. Marcus stood in the center of his office, his hand still resting on Hannah's shoulder. The triumphant smile on his face slowly stiffened, his eyes narrowing, as he stared at me sitting in his leather executive chair. Constance, he said, his voice dropping to a low warning hiss. The equity waiver is signed. It has already been logged by the legal department. You are no longer a shareholder of Joya Era. What are you doing in my chair? Beside him, Hannah clutched the share transfer agreement against her chest like a shield, her voice rising in a thin defensive pitch. Constance, don't be a sore loser. The entire office saw you sign the papers. If you refuse to leave, I'll have security. Go ahead, I said, leaning back in the plush leather seat. I did not raise my voice. I looked at Marcus, then at Hannah, my expression entirely calm, almost pleasant. Call security, Hannah. Let's see whose keycards still work in this building. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a sleek, dark blue folder, placing it gently on the mahogany desk. You're right, Marcus. Joya Era's corporate charter values credibility above all else, I said, tapping the folder with my index finger. Which is why I'm sure you remember the terms of our original credit line with the Orenburg Union Bank 3 years ago. Marcus's pupils contracted instantly. The color began to drain from his face. his jaw clenching so hard the muscles in his cheek leaped. The operational credit line? When we started Joya Era, we didn't have enough capital to secure the prime office lease or the raw material contracts, I explained, my voice steady, carrying clearly through the open office door to the silent staff waiting outside. So we took out a $5 million line of credit. The bank required a primary personal guarantor. I opened the folder, turning the pages toward him. You had no personal assets back then, Marcus. You lived in a rented room and wore a $40 suit. So I was the sole guarantor. My family's agricultural logistics network in Hollow Creek was used as the collateral. I pointed to a specific clause highlighted in yellow ink. According to Section 9 of the credit agreement, my personal guarantee is legally tied to my active equity and employment status at Joya Era. If I voluntarily waive my shares or resign from my executive position, the personal guarantee is instantly revoked, and the outstanding balance of the loan must be settled in full within 24 hours. The silence in the office solidified, pressing down on the three of them like a physical weight. Hannah's hand shook, the paper in her grip rustling loudly. Marcus, what does that mean? What loan? Marcus did not answer her. He was staring at the highlighted clause, his breathing coming in short, ragged gasps. The current outstanding balance on that credit line is $3.6 million, I said, closing the folder with a soft, clean click. Since I signed the equity waiver 5 minutes ago, the revocation notice has already been delivered to the bank's headquarters. You have until 5 p.m. tomorrow to pay the $3.6 million, Marcus. Constance. Marcus took a step forward, his hands shaking as he reached out toward the desk. You can't do this. If the bank calls in the loan, our cash flow will collapse. We won't be able to pay the suppliers. The corporate accounts will be frozen. That is no longer my concern, I said, standing up from his chair. I smoothed the front of my trench coat and picked up my handbag. I am no longer an owner, an executive, or a guarantor of Joya Era. You and your 15% partner can handle the bank. I looked at Hannah, whose face had gone a pasty, sickly shade of gray. Enjoy your office, Ms. Price, I said. I hope the desk fits your standard. The train ride back to Hollow Creek was the quietest journey of my life. For 5 years, my world had been governed by the frantic hum of city traffic, the constant vibration of my corporate phone, and the suffocating pressure of a relationship that had turned into a daily battle of egos. But as the train climbed higher into the northern mountains, the air outside the window turned cool, crisp, and smelling of damp earth and pine needles. The gray concrete of the city gave way to rolling hills of dark green forests and the rushing white waters of the mountain streams. I closed my eyes, letting the rhythmic, steady click-clack of the train tracks soothe the dull ache behind my temples. When I stepped off the platform at Hollow Creek Station, the first thing I saw was a sleek, dark gray SUV parked near the wooden ticket booth. Standing beside the car was Owen Cole. He was wearing a simple, heavy charcoal wool coat over a dark sweater. He was tall, his sharp, elegant features weathered by the clean mountain air, looking entirely different from the pale, soft-faced businessmen of the city. When he saw me carrying my 2 large suitcases, a soft, genuine smile broke through his face. He strode over, his long legs covering the distance in 3 strides, and took the heavy bags from my hands. Welcome home, Constance, Owen said, his deep, warm voice carrying a quiet respect that I had not heard in years. Thank you, Owen, I said, my voice quiet. I didn't expect you to come yourself. The community chair told me you were coming back, he said, opening the trunk to load the bags. He was worried you'd try to carry these up the mountain road yourself. Besides, I wanted to see you. I sat in the passenger seat, the leather warm beneath me. As we drove up the winding mountain road, the town of Hollow Creek appeared below us, a quiet, beautiful cluster of wooden houses with slate roofs, nestled in a valley of gold and green harvest fields. How is your grandmother? I asked, looking out the window. She's doing well, Owen smiled, his hand steady on the steering wheel. She still asks about you every time I visit. She's been keeping the guest room ready since she heard you turned 30. I let out a soft, low laugh, the first real, unburdened laugh I had let out in 3 years. In the city, Marcus had sneered at Hollow Creek, calling it a backwoods village filled with outdated, desperate traditions. He had believed that my desire to return was a pathetic attempt to force him into a proposal. But he had never understood what Hollow Creek truly was. It was not a poor, desperate village. It was one of the oldest, wealthiest agricultural collectives in the north, owning over 80% of the timber and high-altitude tea plantations in the region. The community chair was actually the head of a multi-million-dollar land trust, and Owen Cole was his grandson, the managing director of Cole Holdings, a private venture capital firm that funded half the logistics companies in the city. We had built our lives on these mountains, and our roots went deeper than any city skyscraper. While I was drinking hot mountain tea in my grandmother's warm, wood-scented kitchen, the city was burning. The news of my departure from Joya Era had leaked to the industry within 24 hours. At the company's head office, Marcus sat in his chair, his head in his hands, his desk covered in a mountain of urgent, red-stamped notices from the bank. Mr. Vale. Riley Brooks walked into his office, her face cold, her tablet held firmly in her hand. The Orenburg Union Bank has officially frozen our primary operating account. The $3.6 million must be settled by 5 p.m. today, or they will begin the foreclosure process on our accounts receivable. Where is Hannah? Marcus gasped, his voice raw, his tie loosened, his hair disheveled. She's the partner now. Tell her to bring the financial files. Miss Price is currently in the showroom, Riley said, a thin, sharp smile playing on her lips. She's arguing with the delivery couriers because they refused to release her new designer sofa without a cleared corporate card. Tell her to get her ass in here. Marcus roared, his fist slamming against the desk. When Hannah finally walked in, she didn't look like the elegant, sophisticated lady of the company anymore. Her makeup was smudged from the heat of her tantrums, and her new Chanel earrings looked ridiculously gaudy against her pale, sweating skin. Marcus, she cried, throwing her Louis Vuitton bag onto the sofa. What is the meaning of this? The boutique just canceled my store credit. They said our corporate accounts are under review for insolvency. We are insolvent, Hannah. Marcus screamed, standing up and pointing a shaking finger here. Because you wanted those 15% shares. Because you wanted to make a bet with Constance. She revoked her personal guarantee, and now the bank is calling in the $3.6 million. Hannah froze, her eyes widening in disbelief. But you paid the $1.2 million for me last week. You said you had plenty of money. I paid that using our short-term operational reserves. Marcus yelled, his face turning a deep, suffocated purple. I thought we would lock in the Carter project and cover the gap with the first milestone payment. But without Constance. Carter's legal team sent a cancellation notice this morning. They said they only signed with Joya Era because of Constance's personal quality guarantee. No. Hannah took a step back, her hands shaking as she clutched her expensive blazer. That can't be. She was just an executive. She didn't do any of the actual research. She did everything, Hannah. Marcus fell back into his chair, his face pale and sunken. The client relations, the supply logistics, the bank guarantees. She handled all of it while I sat in this office and let people call me a business genius. He looked at the empty space where my old desk used to sit, the desk he had ordered Hannah to move out just a week ago. For 5 years he had believed that Joya Era was his empire, built by his own hands, and that I was just a petty, aggressive partner who was dragging him down. But now, looking at the black, frozen screen of his corporate account, the truth was staring back at him, cold and unyielding. He was nothing without me. The foreclosure of Joya Era took less than 2 weeks. With the primary operating accounts frozen, and the major clients withdrawing their contracts, the company's valuation plummeted into the dirt. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Owen Cole's venture capital firm, Cole Holdings, officially bought out the bank's debt and initiated a hostile takeover of the remaining shares. Marcus's 51% was seized as collateral for the outstanding loans. I was sitting on the wooden porch of my mountain lodge, watching the gray rain fall over the pine trees of Hollow Creek, when my phone rang. It was Marcus. His voice was raw, trembling, and entirely stripped of the arrogant, victorious confidence he had used during our last fight in my office. Constance. He whispered, his voice cracking. Please. I'm sorry. I was blind. I was a fool. I let her play me because I was too proud to admit that I couldn't run this company without you. I took a slow sip of my hot tea, the warm, herbal scent filling my lungs. It's too late, Marcus, I said quietly. Constance, please. He sobbed, his voice rising in a desperate, pathetic panic. We can start over. Cole Holdings, they're taking over the office today. They're moving all my things out. If you talk to Owen, if you tell him we're still partners, he'll stop the foreclosure. We can go back to the tiny rented apartment. We can build it again. I don't want to build it again, Marcus, I said. And I don't want to live in a rented apartment with you. But what about our 8 years? He cried. The promise we made when we first started? You said you'd always be by my side. I was by your side for 5 years, Marcus, I said. But you were too busy feeding sugar water to another woman to notice. You told me the whole world didn't have to revolve around me. Well, now it doesn't. I hung up the phone and blocked his number. A second later, Owen walked onto the porch, carrying a fresh plate of warm mountain cakes my grandmother had made. He looked down at my face, his eyes soft, and filled with a quiet, protective warmth. Your grandmother is asking if you want to go to the community center tonight. Constance, Owen said, sitting down on the wooden bench beside me. The village elders have prepared the harvest feast. And there are a few young men from the neighboring valleys who are very eager to meet you. I looked at his sharp, elegant profile, then down at his hand resting on the wooden table. Owen, I said, a small, genuine smile touching my lips. Did the community chair really arrange for those matches? Owen's ears turned a soft shade of pink, his eyes darting away in embarrassment. Before he looked back at me, his gaze serious and unyielding. Actually, he murmured, his voice dropping to a low, warm register. I was the one who asked him to. I've been waiting for you to turn 30 for 5 years. Constance. I stared at him, my heart skipping a beat. Not with the tight, suffocating panic I had felt with Marcus, but with a deep, quiet warmth that felt like the sun rising over the mountains of Hollow Creek. Then, I said, reaching out to take a warm mountain cake from his plate, you can be the one to drive me to the center tonight. 1 year later, the annual Hollow Creek Harvest Festival was the grandest event the valley had seen in a decade. The community center was decorated with thousands of warm, golden lanterns, the air thick with the scent of fresh pine, sweet roasted tea, and the rich yeasty smell of mountain wine. I stood on the wooden balcony of the new lodge Owen and I had built together, wearing a simple, elegant crimson silk dress that my grandmother had hand-knitted for me. My hand was resting on Owen's sleeve, my gold wedding band, catching the warm light of the lanterns. Joya Era, now rebranded as Rivers and Coal Logistics, had become the largest agricultural transport network in the Northern Territory, its valuation having reached 10 times what it had been under Marcus's control. Ms. Rivers, Riley Brooks called out from the doorway, her face glowing with a bright, happy smile as she walked over, carrying a glass of champagne. The senior team has arrived from the city. They're raising their glasses to you in the main hall. Thank you, Riley, I smiled. I'll be there in a moment. As Riley turned back into the hall, a soft commotion erupted near the entrance of the garden path. An old, disheveled man in a worn, dirty jacket had tried to push past the community guards. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot and hollow under his dark hair. It was Marcus. He had been working as a low-level sales clerk in the city since the foreclosure, his name ruined, his credit frozen, his apartment repossessed by the bank to cover his personal debts. Beside him, Hannah was no longer there. The moment she realized he had no money and no company left, she had taken her designer bags and fled back to the city, only to find that the local boutique had already filed a criminal complaint against her for using a stolen corporate credit card. Constance, Marcus screamed, his voice cracking as he looked up at the balcony. Constance, please. Just look at me once. Just let me tell you I'm sorry. The guards quickly stepped in, their strong, mountain-bred arms grabbing his shoulders, their faces cold and unyielding. I stood on the balcony, my hand still resting on Owen's arm. I looked down at the man who had once thrown a bank card at my face and told me I was petty for worrying about the company's survival. I looked at his pale, wet face, his dirty jacket, and his shaking hands. But I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no triumph, and no pain. My heart was a placid, quiet lake, frozen solid under the clean winter wind of Hollow Creek. Owen, I said softly, not even looking at the man in the garden. Let's go inside. My grandmother is waiting to start the toast. Of course, my love. Owen smiled, his arm wrapping gently around my waist, his warm hand pressing against my back as he led me into the bright, warm hall. The wooden doors closed behind us with a soft, clean click, shutting out the screaming voice, the rain, and the shadows of the past forever. I took a deep, clean breath and walked into the warm light of my future.